All right, and welcome everyone to the May 26th Board of Zoning Appeals public hearing. And one sec, looks like Martha is here. Okay. And there's Martha. Martha, if you just want to take a second to introduce yourself, that's okay while I set the PowerPoint up.
Okay, thanks, Luis. Hi, everyone. It's nice to meet you and see some familiar faces. My name is Martha. I recently started in Corporation Counsel. I work with Philip, and I'll be assisting the BZA going forward. And so please bear with me as I'm getting up to speed on some of the issues, and I'll answer any questions as promptly as I can. And I look forward to working with you. Thanks, Serena.
Thanks. Welcome, Martha.
Welcome, Martha.
Welcome.
Thank you.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the May 26th Board of Zoning Appeals meeting and public hearing. Tonight we have two items on the agenda, and apologies for the PowerPoint. It's going to be a little wonky as we try to retrofit previous design style and the current design styles. I should have it perfected by the next meeting. The first case is 380 Whitehall Road. Applicant is Congregation Beth Abraham Jacob, and representative agent is going to be Daniel Hirschberg. Daniel is, I believe, with us. Let me just promote him here. Or is he with us, actually? Oh, yeah, he is. And there he is.
I've unmuted myself, so you should be able to hear me now.
Yep. All right, so the way it's going to work for our public hearing is we're going to go ahead and have the applicant present the case to the board, and following the presentation, the public will be provided an opportunity to provide their opposition or support of the project, and the applicant will then be provided an opportunity to respond, and the board at that point can ask any additional questions, and the board at that point will have the option to motion for any action on the case. So what we'll do is we'll start the public hearing presentation. We have about 21 people signed up for public speaking. So we're going to limit public input to 3 minutes per applicant. Please be respectful of the time. I'll have a 30-second warning and then a final warning at the end when your time is up. And at that point, the next applicant will be called on. So at this point, if Dan, you're ready, we can go ahead and start.
I'm ready. If you folks can hear me.
Yes.
I'm representing Congregation Beth Abraham Jacob. Congregation I hold very dear to myself. When it was founded, one of the temples that made up the original Congregation Beth Abraham Jacob had as its president my grandfather, Joseph Hirschberg, of blessed memory. So I am integrally tied to this congregation, even though I'm not currently a member of that congregation. So we're here tonight to make our presentation for proposed security fencing around the lot. We want the fence to be 8 feet tall, where 4 feet is the maximum height allowed. We had originally proposed an area with chain link fence, which wasn't allowed in the front yard. We've adjusted our plan to avoid that incident. It was determined that the 100% opacity privacy fence is permitted where it is on the side yard to screen the playground. Next. This is the original letter that we got from Chris Spencer back in February, which identifies the variance that we're now going for. Located in any front yard or exterior side yard facing the street, provided they are no more than 4 feet in height and no more than 60% opacity. Well, our fence is 25% has 25% opacity, but it is 8 feet tall. Thus, we're here requesting this variance. Next. And I point out the section of fence that had previously been shown. When you saw this project at your workshop meeting, it showed that as chain link fence, they had the extension there, and we've made it all into a 8-foot decorative metal fence. Next. I've provided some information here from some local incidents that had incurred here, which identified some local incidents of anti-Semitism, and they mainly took place against Jewish institutions. Next. I responded to some issues that were raised for the workshop meeting of May 11th. For the character neighborhood, the current character of the neighborhood has certain elements which identify the character of Whitehall Road between South Main and Scotland Avenue. And one element of it is a setback of many of these institutions. They have wide front yards of grass. That's exactly what Congregation Beth Abraham Jacob has. And we believe that the wide lawn established the character of the neighborhood to a much greater degree than the presence or absence of an 8-foot high fence. Next. Another element are fences in the front yard. We're asked to identify other fences, and we identified 2 along the stretch between South Main Avenue and Scotland Avenue, which are in the front yard. One is a 6-foot chain link fence constructed by the city of Albany about 15 or 16 years ago when they redid Whitehall Road. They put in a drainage system. They put in a basin to hold the stormwater, and they put a 6-foot chain link fence, and it's right on the front property line. And across the street, there's a 6-foot privacy fence with 100% opacity on the opposite side of Whitehall Road. Next. Some other issues. Alternatives considered. Other solutions were reviewed and rejected for the reasons listed below. Hedges will not deter invasion of the site. A brick wall would have an opacity of 100% and could be climbed easier than the picket-style metal decorative fence. The applicant already has installed new doors and access control system. They're in the process of updating their cameras to an existing system. They recently installed exterior lighting. Applicant has coated the exterior windows and doors with a coating which makes them shatterproof but not bulletproof. And the applicant has provided private armed security at every service and large events since October 2018 when they were held. Due to the pandemic, a number of services and events have not been held recently. The fence design issues is an 8-foot high decorative metal fence. Has been proposed as the most attractive fence solution for the front yard. The change to an 8-foot chain link fence where permitted is made to make the cost of fencing more affordable while maintaining the same level of security. And the 8-foot high privacy fence with 100% opacity is chosen for a craved-on area to prevent intruders observing children at play. By the way, that has occurred in the past where unidentified people are back in that area between Beth Abraham Jacob and B'nai Shalom people that have no connection with the group observing children at play. Not necessarily, we don't know what their intent was, but they were observing them, which makes people hesitant. There were a couple other elements that the 11 parking spaces are not fenced, not because there was any reason to leave them out there. These are parking spaces that have no specific users, and they'll be used after the spaces inside the fence were all filled. And that would have moved the fence closer to South Manning Boulevard expansion. For For substantially, a request for instance locally that create a hazard for you. The applicant has been subject of a number of acts of vandalism, including damaged tents out for outside events twice, dumping of garbage behind the building, intruders entering the building, shouting anti-Semitic epithets from passing cars, letters, emails, phone calls with threats, etc. While none of these items have risen to the level of bodily harm to members, guests, employees, or children, the incidents below occurred at a location which similarly had not been subject to previous incidents of physical attacks. So what I'm saying here is that unless you want to wait until a physical attack occurs which leads to the injury or death of people to justify offense, there's no way to predict in advance when these sort of events would occur. Next. I listed the events that were occurred during the last 7 years or so. And recently, you may have heard Jews have recently been attacked on the streets of New York City and its suburbs, and vandalism of synagogues in Riverdale, New York also occurred. The temple has made great communication with the City of Albany Police for incidents. And a representative of the City of Albany Police Department, I believe, will verify the calls and reasons. Security measures on the building that could make sense other than fence. What do other synagogues do? I list what this synagogue has already done. The applicant is aware of steps taken by other congregations, but does not have permission to disclose what steps have been taken by each congregation. Access control is universally used. Cameras and exterior lighting have been increased based upon recent attacks. Impact on environment. The installation of the fence will have no impact on drainage, traffic, wetlands, drainage courses, sewer usage, water uses, endangered species, threatened species, species of special concern, critical environment area, noise, lighting, or odors. Therefore, the statement that the project will have no negative impact on the environment is correct. Next. This is a repeat of the 20 deaths that have occurred during the last 10 years. These are 7 incidents which have occurred. I listed them before, but I point out these ended up with people who are dead or wounded. Next. And this is a proposed rendering of what the fence would look like. That's a picture over which we superimposed the fence with brick columns each side of the gate and brick columns down at the corners of the fence. Next. And these are existing condition photos which show the existing conditions at the congregation. It shows the wide lawn in front. It shows from the side view, there's a significant lawn on that side. And it also shows the parking at the rear for the senior housing. I think that's the end of my presentation. I will try to answer any questions they have unless you want to take comments from the public first.
Dan, I saw that we had Officer Justin Wallace registered and advised that he was here at your request. Did you need him to provide any testimony for your case?
There were people that said that they wanted to provide additional comments. I don't know whether or not it was testimony, but the rabbi for the congregation is available and signed on, and I think he would be prepared to use some of my time to finish his, to make some comments.
Perhaps we can either allow him out as part of the presentation or at the testimony side. I think I'll leave it up to the board.
Okay. I don't know whether or not he can raise his hand or hit the chat button or somehow get your attention, and maybe you could have him speak.
Yeah. Luis, why don't you let the rabbi go ahead and join Mr. Hirschberg as the presenter for this?
The name again? I'm sorry.
Go ahead and let the rabbi join Mr. Hirschberg, Luis.
Is it, I think I unmuted the right person. Was that, let's see. Moshe. I think I unmuted the right person. Moshe Rabbi Bomzer. Oh, okay.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Mr. Hirschberg, I'm no longer the rabbi of the synagogue.
Oh, yes. You
I'm
were
the
for so
rabbi
many
of-
years, Rabbi Bomser. I just tumbled
Thank
to the
you.
fact.
I appreciate that. I was there. I was the rabbi from 1984 to 2012, but I'm here to support the project and to follow after Mr. Hirschberg, who is the prince of all guidelines when it comes to building our building and protecting our building through all of the years. And so I thank him for that. Ladies and gentlemen, for the sake of understanding and appreciating, we're going through a very difficult time. While we can imagine to ourselves it might calm down and be more peaceful, and we can have a more interfaith community and everyone caring for each other, at this point it is very frightening. It's frightening both here in Albany, it's frightening in the city, when I have to get calls from community relations and saying, well, they're having a march on behalf of the Muslim community. Can we make sure that it's protected and it's cared for? It left us with a feeling, thank God there were no synagogues downtown, which we should never feel. We should always feel comfortable. We should always feel secure. But to protect the integrity of our children, most importantly, protect the integrity of our families, to protect the integrity of our synagogue and its building, and all of that it represents in terms of past, present, and the future of the Albany community, I consider it important for us to, and I offer to please have you consider the possibility that the 8-foot fence being requested is a dynamic that has been carried out in other communities and other synagogues. Houston, Texas, my wife is from Houston, Texas, and they have surrounded theirs in a very decorative way, in a very sincere way, and it's been integrated into community in a very positive way. It's not meant to be something which would be an eyesore, but rather an eye enhancer of knowing that we're protecting not only protecting religion, but protecting property, as well as, most importantly, when our children play in their playground, they have supervision, but God forbid anything can happen under all circumstances. So I thank you, Mr. Hirschberg, for using part of your time, but I would have preferred to hear from you directly.
Yeah. Louise, it was Rabbi Feldman who was the current rabbi. I don't know if you could lock on to him.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh, I apologize. I'm sorry, Rabbi Feldman. Forgive me.
Yeah, no worries. I just like to add a couple of things to what Dan Hirschberg and Rabbi Bomser said, and that is that what we are requesting is, as Rabbi Bomser mentioned, common among synagogues all around the country, especially synagogues that are on main thoroughfares or in cities. But even synagogues in suburbs currently have fences around them. I'll give you just a few statistics in addition to what Dan Hirschberg had on his presentation. There were in 2019 over 1,521 hate crime incidents that were related to religion. Of those, 2/3 were against Jews, which is 5 times higher than the next closest religious group. 2/3 of hate crimes that were related to religions were against Jews. Furthermore, 2019 saw the most crimes against Jews, the most anti-Semitic number of anti-Semitic incidents of any year in the history of the United States, with 2,024 reported anti-Semitic incidents in 2019. The number in 2020 is very similar. And just last week, there were 200 anti-Semitic incidents around the country. Our synagogue, as Dan mentioned, has experienced vandalism and threatening phone calls and letters and emails sent to us. So we are in a vulnerable position. If you search on Google for Synagogue Albany or for Albany Shul, we are the first search result that comes up. We are out there in the open on a main road with our name proudly shown. And so we do feel vulnerable and open to these incidents. We believe that we have spent tremendous resources, both in our volunteers and in our funds, for armed security guards, volunteers who are patrolling during services instead of being inside during services. We feel that we could, although we plan on still having volunteer security, we do feel that we could ease up some of that by having a fence, which we know could keep people away. You could kind of have, it's a deterrent, and it means that anybody entering your property can only enter from one particular entry point, which can be visible from a number of angles for our volunteer security team to observe. And the same thing is true for our playground. We hope that we would love for our children to be able to play safely in the playground with minimal adult supervision, which is going to be possible if there is that opaque barrier surrounding the playground, so that it's kind of an extension of our building. So for all of those reasons, we request this variance. Jewish tradition teaches in Hebrew, Chacham Einav Berosho. A wise person can look ahead and see what's in the future, which means in Jewish tradition, we don't wait for bad things to happen. If we can foresee things that might happen, we do everything that's in our power to prevent those things from happening so that it never comes to that. We don't want to be in the newspapers as another Pittsburgh or another Poway or another Riverdale. We'd rather not be known for that. We'd rather do whatever we can to prevent it. So thank you so much for hearing our appeal. And I look forward to hearing what the rest of the public has to say as well.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Mr. Hirschberg. Are there any questions from the board?
I have a question. Has there been any thought that an opaque fence might create a security issue because you couldn't see, theoretically if someone was sneaking in? I was just curious if that thought entered anyone's mind.
The opaque fence is strictly around the playground, and that'll be visible from our building. And by not having it visible from the outside, we think that would prevent any incidents in there. There's also the security of not having people looking at your children out there playing there with what sort of evil thoughts they may have. Again, you're never sure. But again, there'll always be a staff person available for the playground. It's not there, but again, we need less staff if in fact it was completely surrounded by that privacy.
Martin, you had a question?
I do, once I can figure out how to turn mute off. I'm curious as to how the size of the fence was determined and what the applicant determined the benefits of an 8-foot fence versus a 6 or a 7-foot fence that would minimize the variance. As Dan is aware, I might have told you that the board is bound by law to minimize the variance request. And therefore, we must look to communicate with the applicant that any departure from the standard, we're going to look at that departure as an opportunity to work towards a minimum variance. So can you provide some context as to how you chose the size of the fence? And are there other architectural features from the fence that were considered to limit people's ability to scale a smaller fence?
Well, when we looked at the fence, there was always the capability of designing it with some hook or some other change to the pickets that makes it a little more difficult to climb. But a 6-foot fence, as many people know, when you're young and agile and you can jump, is not much of a barrier for such people. Getting over a 6-foot fence is relatively easy, even if you don't have much of a foothold. So we went to an 8-foot fence. A 7-foot fence is in between. We think it gives us less protection than an 8-foot fence. But I would hold out that a 6-foot fence by itself, given size, shape, and of a lot of people that are doing horrendous things are quite often younger people, and they're fit enough to get over a 6-foot fence. The 7-foot fence in between might give us a partial control because it's harder to go over, but we think 8-foot fence makes it difficult to go over. Does it mean nobody can get over it? No, obviously if there are a couple of people cooperating, they could lift somebody up high enough to probably get over it, but it's high enough that it makes it more difficult for a single person to get over.
So to the second part of the question, being the design of the top of the fence, it looks like those spires would be a significant deterrent to anyone attempting to climb over that fence. Is that a design feature that could be enhanced on a shorter fence in order to discourage or prohibit people from climbing it?
Yeah. Well, again, the one question is, if we took the tops, there are designs that are more foreboding to people. They actually look like they're intended to be a more industrial application than this application. We tried to keep it so it's similar to other residential applications or other applications. And because the fence is so far back from the roadway, we thought the visible impact of the 8-foot fence would not be significant. We just don't think a 6-foot fence is high enough, even with the enhanced tops on it. Again, it would be better than nothing, but again, we don't think it'll do the deterrent that we really need. We're trying to deter intruders to the maximum extent feasible. And by again, there are places in industrial areas where 10-foot fence with barbed wire are put on them too. That would really deter them, but would certainly be inappropriate for this area.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions from the board? In that case, let me ask you one or two, Mr. Hirschberg. And please, board members, if you have an additional question, jump back in. So my first question, Mr. Hirschberg, is, has any other synagogue, either in the capital region or in the state of New York, put up an 8-foot fence of this nature with the spikes on the top, that treatment that you were just discussing with Martin?
I am sure there are some. I haven't searched other areas for the fence, as I was trying to concentrate on the incidences rather than fences. I am sure if the board wants to continue this case, we'll look for evidences of other fences in New York State. I searched the fences in our community in Albany, Schenectady, and Troy. None of those had a high fence on them. Some had shorter decorative fences on it, but nobody had an 8-foot high fence around them. But I'm sure we can find instances of it elsewhere in New York State.
Thank you. A follow-up on that, Mr. Hirschberg. Without giving any details that may be confidential or privileged in any discussions between the synagogue and the FBI, Attorney General, or law enforcement generally, have there been any specific suggestions by any of those law enforcement agencies or such others that may have communicated with the synagogue to install such a fence?
I think there are members of the congregation that have had discussion with law enforcement agencies, and I think there's a member of a law enforcement agency that would like to speak tonight. I'd leave it to them to talk about it because a lot of those discussions were confidential and had to do with specific incidents that occurred. And I don't know whether or not they were broad enough to address the question of fence or no fence.
Thank you, Mr. Hirschberg. And let me ask one more question and then return the questioning to any other members of the board. And if there are no further questions at this point, we'll move on to get public comment. So my last suggestion, is there any sort of a best practices for heightened security, particularly around religious institutions that have been the subject of hate crimes, that the synagogue has either contemplated or has discussed with other congregations across the United States or with security professionals?
There were some discussions held. I wasn't privy to them. I was brought in after the fact. And the result of those discussions was the design presented to me, which is an 8-foot fence. Now, I don't know what other things might have been discussed. They may be other elements that people use to deter. Again, some of them might be applicable here, but they did try to take the steps that would make it difficult for someone to come in undetected, but it doesn't present them coming in detected. An awful lot of people that commit these crimes don't care if they're caught, don't care what happens to them after the fact. So that if you get something, a camera or alarms that identify people coming in, it doesn't do you much good to deter the action that some of these people take. I mean, I'm not sitting here and saying that there are times where less egregious actions are taken, which could be deterred. But when you're talking about these actions where people shot, killed, or wounded other people, most of those cases having door control or cameras or anything else don't give you much. You take an automatic weapon and you blow off the lock off the door and alarms ring. That doesn't do you very much good because this gentleman doesn't care about alarms ringing. It gives you a 3 or 4 or 5 minute response time till law enforcement could get there. And who knows how many people get killed during that. I mean, I'm not trying to paint a horrific picture because this thing has happened in other places where somebody walked into a congregation or actually the congregation was locked and actually broke in through the door to get in and shot people. So, I'm not trying to invent situations that haven't occurred. Some of these fatal events occurred just like that. Somebody broke into the building, even though there was some security in place.
Thank you, Mr. Hirschberg. I don't believe we have any further questions at this point. So, Luis, if you could allow Officer Wallace to go first as we begin taking public comment, then why don't we take up public comment? We'll give Mr. Hirschberg and the rabbi a brief rebuttal, and we may ask some additional questions during that rebuttal.
Sure thing. Officer Justin Wallace, you should already be able to speak. If you'd like to unmute yourself, I'll provide you with the 3-minute time frame for the public input.
I'm sorry, guys. Can you give me 1 second? I'm just talking to the owner of Spinners Plaza, and I just want to confirm something before I speak to the board. It'll just give me 30 seconds. I appreciate it.
While we're waiting, I did have a quick question. I know that it was mentioned that there were armed security personnel or officers or guards. Is that 24/7 or just for a specific set of hours?
That's when the event's taking place. They normally come like a half an hour before the event starts, and they wait until everybody leaves after the event, and they're there when the building is locked up. And they're there to provide a sense of security, even though they're private guards that are licensed to be armed. Again, it doesn't give you much security. They're the first line of defense, and I'd hate to put those people in jeopardy if we could avoid it.
And it's not for every service or for weekday services. It's just for the major Sabbath services or holiday services. So
Sabbaths and holiday services and events. There are a number of events at night that are probably better attended than the services are at the congregation. And there's always things like awards, dinners, things like that go on. So pretty much just about every week, there'd be at least something in addition to the services going on that requires security.
Luis, I see Officer Wallace is raising his hand.
Hey, everybody. I'm Officer Wallace, Albany Police Department. I'm the community service officer, and I cover Zone 11, and I cover Arbor Hill. I was asked to join the meeting tonight and just talk about things that I've been doing with the synagogue at 380 Whitehall Road. I've been working with Josh Garak. I've been involved for approximately a year and a half. Everybody can hear me, okay? Okay, thank you. So Josh has asked me several times to the location. We've reviewed several different security assessments that they've worked on, they've come up with, they've implemented at the location in regards to inside and outside cameras, lightings. They've gone over the fencing with me. We've also included another officer, Zeke Tony. He runs our firearms, and he's also certified in security assessment on many different levels. He's kind of our go-to guy, and we do a in-house quick security assessment overview for homeowners, businesses, organizations. So that's something I do as a community service officer. He welcomed me in. He went over everything with me. You know, he and the synagogue were already, they're pretty much on the leading edge of security up there with their training, everything they're doing up there. They went over the fencing with the police department, and I've talked to commanders and lieutenants, and we are all in favor of what they're doing up there. It makes our jobs easier. It makes them feel safe and secure. The threats are real. I overwatch pretty much all the synagogues in the city of Albany through all my area. So I'm constantly keeping up to date with what's going on, the threats, and many people within the Jewish Federation. So, you know, this is a great thing for the synagogue. And, you know, if, you know, others want to join, then more power to them. I was just on the phone, and that's why I asked for the extra time with the owner of Spinners Plaza just down the road, BMT Management, Mike Biglucci. He also stated to me verbally just now that he supports the variance and the security upgrade there, and he's willing to write a letter to the board. I tried to get that earlier today, but he was really hard to nail down and get him to agree and write that today. So I apologize for not having it to you guys, but if that's something you guys want, I can have that to you by tomorrow from BMT Management. And again, they own that plaza up there and several different businesses throughout Albany. And also I was taking some notes real quick in regards to 6, 7, 8-foot fences and 10-foot fences, the differences. I've had some experience in Arbor Hill location at some businesses where kids and people jumped the fences. And, you know, we had a certain spot, I don't want to mention, but it was a 6-foot gate, electronic gate. They were trying to do the zoning variance there. I believe it's a 6-foot area.
30 seconds.
Kids kept jumping the fence there, went on for years, caused thousands and thousands of dollars of damages. Across the street, they have an 8-foot fence. They never, ever jump that fence over there. And it's a height thing. It's like a mental thing where they just don't do it for whatever reason. And it made a big difference. We just upgraded that fence 6 foot to an 8-foot fence, and no one has jumped that fence yet. And it's all on video camera, and it's a good thing.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Typically, we don't ask questions of people that are speaking from the audience. It seems like in this particular case, the Albany Police Department is providing comment to the security features. Is it appropriate to ask a question of the last speaker, I'm sorry, the officer, in regards to the security assessment, or is this testimony being provided as a individual's testimony for the case?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Martin. And what I'd like to do, I think it is obvious at this point that we won't be able to come to a decision on the variances requested of us today. And so what I'd like to do with the board members is put together some questions to provide to the department to receive as official input from the Albany Police Department on this issue. And I thank you, Officer Wallace, but I think that the way that you've appeared is essentially, as Martin pointed out, a personal opinion, even though you're giving it as an expert law enforcement officer. I think it would be better for our record on a variance of this nature, which is a question of first impression in Albany, that we get a formal opinion from the APD with such things as are possible for the department to lay out, again, without exposing any confidential or sensitive conversations with this synagogue, any other synagogues, any other religious institutions on issues of security and precautions. So thanks for the question, Martin. It's a very good next step for us to take with the APD.
Okay, so the question I have is more directed in general terms. That would be a better question for when we put together a list of questions for the department. So I'll hold that.
Thank you. And again, thank you again, Officer Wallace. Luis,
thank
would you
you.
like to take our next bunch of public comment?
Yep. The next on the list, we have Jack Rosenblum. And one moment.
Lewis and Richard, just there's a comment in the comment chat saying there's one of the speaker has to leave early and is asked, so someone else is asking that he be allowed to speak first. or to go next, I guess. I don't know if you see that in the chat.
Does the board like to have the individual go first or next?
What number is this gentleman, Luis? Would he make it before 7 o'clock if we didn't elevate his position in the line?
I don't think I have him on the list. Richard Preem. Oh, I have him. He's number 18 on the list. So given 3 minutes, it would probably be towards much later than 7.
Okay, let's move him up. And if there are any members of the public who are waiting online that are disconcerted by that, I'm happy to talk with them later. But we would, given the seriousness of this issue, and again, it's an issue of first impression, I'd like to give people the chance to speak before they leave. We've occasionally had public comment that's gone on for 2 or 3 hours. And while it doesn't seem that it'll be that way tonight, we'd like to try and get everybody in if possible when they're there. So thanks, Luis, if you can move him up and we can hear from him.
Yep. So Richard Preem, you've been unmuted, and whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and start, and we'll start the timer.
Thank you, and thank you also for Josh, who mentioned to you that I have to leave at some point. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. My name is Richard Preem, and I'm the Deputy National Director of the Community Security Service. We're a 501c3 that provides security to synagogues across the country. We train volunteers actually to help protect their own synagogue. We are in around 125 institutions across the country. We have trained 5,000 security volunteers, and we also have a presence at Beth Abraham Jacob. And I just wanted to share sort of my perspective. Some of the things that we've been seeing around the country in recent weeks, but also over the last few years, there's been an uptick in anti-Semitic incidents, cases of vandalism, harassment, but also assaults, people leaving the synagogue or people coming to synagogue trying to start trouble and then being deterred because there are trained volunteers there who call law enforcement and prevent bad things from happening. And in many of our synagogues, we do try to encourage measures to, how we like to call it, to keep the bad guys as far away as possible from the people that we are protecting. And I would say that the overwhelming majority of our institutions have over time upgraded their security infrastructure, and that included variants such as these that put a fence at a certain location, especially if it's what we would call a vulnerable spot of the protected site, or it would be put certain bollards in place, or other kinds of variances that from a security point of view help either cars that have hostile intent or people that try to gather information about the protected site to make sure they don't have visibility of what's going on, and a number of other sort of security reasons that motivate these kind of decisions. So I just wanted to share that and also underscore something that for me is very concerning, the recent uptick in anti-Semitic incidents. We just had a few weeks ago in Riverdale, not that far. It's in the Bronx of New York, where 6 synagogues were repeatedly vandalized. We had last weekend people leaving a synagogue in Brooklyn who were assaulted. And a message that we're saying to our constituents is that now more than ever, like, security needs to be prioritized. And even though we're not directly involved with any of the physical changes to the synagogue in Albany, I think it is important to share that if we look at the synagogues that we have around the country, that these are exactly the kind of measures that other synagogues are taking to increase their security. So just wanted to share that, and thank you for having me, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. The next speaker is Seth Rosenblum.
Hi there, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I don't know. I'm used to Zoom, but not being able to see myself. So I am a member. Hello, thank you for hearing my commentary. I am a member of the board of directors for several years of the synagogue. I grew up in Albany. I grew up as a child around Buckingham Pond, and never had the experience of feeling anti-Semitism or feeling unsafe in my own community until the last 3 or 4 years, when the rise in anti-Semitic incidents, both locally and nationally, has put this at the forefront. I've made the choice to come back here and to own a home in Albany and to raise my children. I'm thankful to have 4 children who join me most weeks attending services at our congregation at Beth Abraham Jacob. And I have to say, I approach that weekly expression of my freedom of religion with a lot of trepidation lately. The rise of the radical right in our country and the recent armed shootings leave us very, very concerned about our ability to exercise our freedom of worship. So as a neighbor, as a property owner right here in the neighborhood, I do not believe that adding a fence will do anything to detract from the character or quality of the neighborhood. Quite to the contrary, if God forbid there were some sort of incident, even something minor like vandalism, or we've seen synagogues with swastikas painted on them, even that would dramatically reduce property values and scare our neighbors, both those who are members of our community as well as the people around us. And so for all these reasons, I feel it's incumbent on the board to grant this variance. There was a question raised that I'd like to comment on about whether other synagogues in the area are in fact putting up fences as well. And I'd like to point out our building has some unique features. We are the newest synagogue, to my knowledge, to be constructed in the capital region. Our building dates to circa 1989. What does that mean? It's built to be welcoming. It's built with a modern architectural aesthetic that has larger windows, and it's built to be handicap accessible. And so the vulnerability of this building is unique as compared to some more legacy structures where the sanctuaries are elevated or where they're more imposing or invisible to the street. And so we have actually invested recently in additional handicap accessible upgrades. This is wonderful to make our synagogue inclusive, but it does create some unique security risks that this fence would mitigate. I'd like to further add that the APD has been very helpful to us. We want to thank the APD. They've been responsive when there have been concerns, but there have been times when the threat level to our synagogue has been increased, most notably around the Tree of Life shooting in Pittsburgh a couple years ago. Thank you. And I was aware at that time we requested additional police details at our expense from the APD. We were willing to pay them to come be on site. And unfortunately, due to their resource constraints, they were not able to staff that. And so I don't mean any disrespect or lack of appreciation. We really appreciate the police's partnership, but there's a recognition that there are resources in the community that we need that are not available. And this fence would help mitigate the need for additional resources from police, whether in response to incidents or whether at our request for detailing. So I hope the board will grant this variance. Thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you. The next speaker is Roy Feldman, but the applicant did speak during the presentation. I'll leave it to the board to see if you'd like to have additional comments during the testimony period.
Luis, I presume that the rabbi will be present with Mr. Hirschberg for any rebuttal testimony and any questions that the board may have after hearing the public. So if the rabbi doesn't mind forfeiting the 3 minutes that he had signed up for before he spoke with Mr. Hirschberg, we can move down our list a little bit more and hopefully get everybody in without it going too late in the evening.
Sure. The next speaker would be Arthur Brunner. Arthur Brunner, whenever you're ready, I'll start the timer.
Hi, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak to this. And thank you to the board members for hearing our request. I'm currently, excuse me, I'm currently the president of Congregation Beth Abraham Jacob, and I want to say a little bit about our history. Seth and Dan have alluded to that a little bit. We've been part of the Whitehall Road neighborhoods for about 30 years. And our commitment to the neighborhood was exemplified in 2017 when we invested about $1 million in updating and upgrading our building. And at that time, we really did not talk about, nor did we implement anything for security. I think had we known then what we know now, we would have changed the doors at that time and we would have done other things with the windows at that time. Instead, we're left, since the Tree of Life shooting in Pittsburgh in October 2018, we've been left in a position where we needed to rapidly undertake as much as we could in the way of physical upgrades to our property. And since that time, this private security that we hire has taken about 5% of our annual operating budget. And we don't have a very big budget, but it's a priority, if nothing else, to help our people feel more secure coming to the building on a regular basis. Congregation Beth Abraham Jacob is an Orthodox Jewish congregation of about 125 member units, that is individuals and families. About 2/3 of them are residents and mostly homeowners in the city of Albany, like Seth and myself, and Dan Hirschberg, actually. Most attendees at our main services on Saturdays observe traditional Jewish law and walk to the building, the men wearing kippot or skull caps, which makes us sort of visible and potentially vulnerable to people with hostile intentions. It's common for our services on Saturdays to attract 80 to 100 people of all ages, and a few times a year we have events where the number is double or even sometimes almost triple that. As president of the congregation since July of 2018, and especially since the Tree of Life shootings, I find myself during our worship services often casting a watchful eye towards the street. It's very easy to see at our windows, as Seth was talking about, right? They're very big windows. I looked the other day, I'm not a very tall person, but the windows start just above my knee and they go to about 7 feet high. So you can imagine 2 feet at 7 feet. So anybody can walk right up to the building and look right in. In that time, I found myself sometimes distracted, looking out the window towards Whitehall Road and the corner of Manning Boulevard by fears of a hostile intrusion. And over the time as president, I've participated in a number of security briefings that were given by the Jewish Federation's Community Relations Council. And they always talk to the FBI Counterterrorism Task Force and the state police and tell us about no known threats, but it's not the known threats that concern us, it's the random unknown threats. And I just want to reiterate some of the incidents that Dan and others have talked about. We have people walk literally right outside our office windows on a regular basis, and we have people dumping things in our parking lot and coming up to our doors at all times of the day or night that we don't necessarily know about. The building is vulnerable and we want help averting that vulnerability. Thank you.
The next speaker is Bruce Cohen. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Cohen, you can start.
Hi, can you hear me? Yes, thank you. My name is Bruce Cohen. I have been a member of Beth Abe for well in excess of 3 decades. Sorry that I'm that old. But I can tell you that for most of those years, when I was at the synagogue, I never had any concern with safety. But in more recent years, it's become clear that there are people who are intent on doing harm to strangers simply because of their race or religion. And increasingly, month after month, even this year in 2021, there have been lots of hate crimes, and especially among Jews. Synagogues have been attacked, and you've heard this from other speakers. In 2021, we've had incidents in Los Angeles, in Skokie, in Salt Lake City, in the Bronx, and more. There's been tons of vandalism incidents. Last week, reported in the Times-Union, President Biden signed a new hate crimes bill. And in her comments about the bill, Vice President Harris noted that our hate crimes are increasing and they're occurring in the biggest and the smallest of cities. There was a recent Pew Research Foundation study that was issued. It was called, I guess it was recent, Jewish Americans in 2020. 75% of those who were polled said that they felt that there was more anti-Semitism today than just 5 years ago. The world has changed. It's a lot more dangerous. And I can tell you that none of us want to spend a ton of money just for the purpose of protecting our members from being attacked, for simply exercising our right of prayer. And by the way, it's ironic because many of those prayers are for the welfare of humans of all kinds, of all stripes, and it's for peace in the world. But the fact is, we can't afford to do anything but enhance security. We need to listen to security advisors. We need to see what others are doing to protect themselves.
Seconds.
We know we need a fence that will be effective in deterring any kind of potential tragedy. And I'm happy that our congregational leaders are applying for this, because if they didn't and we used a simply ineffective fence and some tragic event occurred, they'd have to live with that for the rest of their lives. Hence, we're asking you to allow us effective protection. I'm going to ask you to please not let this opportunity pass without doing your part to help protect us in this era of what, to me at least, seems
Mr. Cohen, your
like
time is up.
renewed racism and extremism. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Joshua Garak.
Good evening, members of the Albany Zoning Board. Thank you for allowing me to speak this evening about Congregation Beth Abraham Jacobs Security and Fencing Project. I'm a board member, an executive board member, and the security chair for the synagogue. My family and I moved to Albany about 5 years ago. We specifically moved to the Buckingham Pond area because it was walking distance to Congregation Beth Abraham Jacob. Since moving here, we've attended daily and weekly services regularly. Over the past years, we've witnessed a significant increase in anti-Semitic attacks on Jewish institutions. After the Poway, California shooting and the Tree of Life synagogue attack, members of the CBAJ community realized that we needed to review and enhance our own security procedures to ensure that attacks couldn't take place at our synagogue. Since then, we've been working with the Albany Police Department to conduct security and policy reviews. We've also contacted CSS to train our members in awareness and deterrence techniques. We've also enhanced, as they spoke about many times, the physical components of the building. These upgrades have been extremely timely, as in the past few weeks, we've seen a sharp increase in these anti-Semitic attacks. In 2019, the Albany Jewish community received multiple bomb threats. Just a few weeks ago, multiple synagogues, just a few hours south in Riverdale, received vandalism. Last week, a 29-year-old Jewish man was beaten in the streets of New York. Every day, unfortunately, we're waking up to another attack of a Jew in this country. This trend has been so significant that both Governor Cuomo and Mayor de Blasio have allocated NYPD assets to protect Jewish institutions. We're not asking the city to expend any funds on our behalf. We're asking that you allow us to do what we feel is in our best interest of protecting ourselves, our children, and our community. I thank you for your support and understanding, and look forward to hearing positive news from you.
Thank you, Mr. Garak. The next speaker on the list is Tom Kliegerman.
Good evening. My name is Tom Kligerman. I've lived in the city of Albany for 30 years, Capital District for 40 years. My children have all attended Albany High School. My youngest is still a junior there now. I'm a member of Congregation Beth Abraham Jacob, and I'm the co-chairman of the House and Grounds Committee. As a longtime city resident, I am deeply saddened by the recent series of tragic, violent shooting deaths that have just occurred literally days ago in the city. As a longtime resident, this kind of gun violence would almost have always been associated with larger cities, but sadly, it's here too in Albany. Since the murder of 11 Jews while they were praying in synagogue in a quiet section of Pittsburgh on the Sabbath of October 27, 2018, our congregation established a more organized security committee, trained many of our members to be greeters to screen potential threats, and hire the services, as has been said, of professional armed security. In addition to what almost any large building has, cameras and security lighting, we knew that we also need the security of an enclosed space for the protection of our young children who play outside after and during services, for the protection of our members and guests who come to synagogue on the Sabbath and holidays to rest and worship, so they can be unencumbered by the need to worry for their own safety. Now, our synagogue is located on Whitehall Road in a section of Albany, which is really a model of what's called a naturally occurring retirement neighborhood. As Dan Hirschberg alluded to, between South Main and New Scotland Avenue, on the south side of Whitehall Road, where our synagogue is located, you will find a whole series of relatively large properties with mostly religious-based properties, including the Albany JCC, Beth Abraham Jacob, B'nai Shalom Synagogue, St. Sophia Greek Church, interspersed with senior-friendly apartments, multifamily units located directly on or behind the religious properties. On the north side of Whitehall, you find modest, well-kept homes with minimal setback. And of course, on both sides of Whitehall Road, there are sidewalks, almost always bustling with people of all ages walking to and fro. Now, I'm going to put on my engineer hat. Like Dan Hirschberg, I'm also a professional engineer with 40 years in the field. The city regulations restrict fence height to 4 feet for those fences directly on the street side. And that's a reasonable height for the typical 1/4 to 1/3 of an acre lots that you'd find on the north side of Whitehall Road. Shallow setbacks, generally one-story structures that typify this side of Whitehall Road. However, the south side parcels, a taller fence, such as 8 feet, is very well proportional. Beth Abraham Jacob sits on 6 acres of real estate. Our building is 35 feet high in some parts. It's set back over 100 feet from the road, and the proposed fence will be 40 feet behind the sidewalk. All of these proportionalities are significantly different than if this fence was being proposed for the other side of Whitehall Road. The wrought iron picket style fence with brick piers.
Mr. Klieger, your time is up.
Okay. I strongly urge you to approve the variance. Thank you.
Thank you. We have the next speaker as Moshe Rabbi Bomzer, but I'll leave it up to the board if you wanted to take the same approach as the speaker that spoke with the presentation, or if you'd like to provide the speaker an opportunity to speak during the commentary period.
Thank you, Luis. And I'll put this question to the rabbi. Since you spoke already, Rabbi Bomzer, would you be willing to speak again on paper, that is in writing to the board? And by the way, I urge all of the speakers tonight that have given their public statements, and of course, the applicant and the congregation in general, to write to us, because as I said earlier, we will not be coming to a decision on this case tonight. So please supplement our record as much as you feel necessary by writing to us. So Rabbi Bomzer, if you'd like to speak again, we'd be willing to let you come in and speak again right now. Although, as I had said earlier, I would like to try and allow everyone who has not had a chance yet to speak first. And then, of course, everyone here will have a chance to write the board in the weeks before we get to our next discussion of this case. And Luis, for now, if you'd like to proceed on to the next person in line, we'll let the rabbi think about it, and we'll ask again when we get to the end of the line.
Okay. The next speaker is Laura Siegel. Laura, if you're ready, you're muted. You can go ahead and unmute yourself, and I'll start your timer.
I'll move to allow the next person to speak.
Thank you. The next speaker, I have Sanford Rosenblum. Sanford Rosenblum, when you're ready, you can unmute yourself, and I'll start your timer.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. Members of my extended family have been in America since shortly after the Civil War. More recently, my grandfather and my father came before and after World War I. The reasons were the same, and that is to try to leave murderous anti-Semitism behind. And until recently, largely succeeded. Those left behind in Europe in 1921, when my parents and grandparents on both sides came to America, only 20 years later, in 1941, were murdered. I had the benefit and the blessing of living near my grandparents. My wife never knew her grandparents. All four of them were murdered by the Nazis in Hungary. We've lived in a blessed land. The mere fact that I can address you and see how utterly fixed you are on the challenge of deciding this issue leads me to believe that we are still living in a blessed land. The opening words of the 2017 code that you administer talk about avoiding danger, and the word safety appears. You have to go deep down into the code to see anything about fences. And the impression one gets in reading about fences, the issues are aesthetic.
30 seconds.
They're not about danger. They're not about safety. But that's what this issue is. This is very personal to me. One cousin did escape the Germans in Hungary to Pittsburgh. And in 2018, that cousin of my wife sat alongside of 11 other Jews who were murdered in the Tree of Life. How ironic a name, the Tree of Life, murdered by a madman who was beset with anti-Semitic ideas and notions.
Thank you, Mr.
Thought he was
Rosenblum.
carrying out something for the benefit of him or the community.
Mr. Rosenblum, your time is up. Thank you.
Thank you for listening.
The next speaker is Wendy Cotter. However, I don't see the individual on the list. If you're under a different name, Wendy, you can feel free to raise your hand and I can unmute you. Otherwise, we can move on to the next speaker, Benjamin Schwartz. Just give a second for Wendy to see if she's under a different name.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, just give me one sec. Doesn't look like I have Wendy. So Benjamin, you can go ahead.
Sure. So, I would like to echo what many people have said. I've been a member of Congregation Beth Abraham Jacob now for probably 30 years. I grew up in Albany. I'm a member of the board and the executive of Congregation Beth Abraham Jacob. And as everyone else has expressed, I feel the same danger. I have 3 kids in the area. It's really concerning, and I want us to be able to do everything we can to feel safer while we worship at our synagogue. I do a lot of security things for a large bank. And one of the things that's emphasized is what's called defense in depth, meaning you want to have multiple layers of defense. So as Daniel Hirschberg mentioned, we've done many things. We've put veneers on our windows. We have better access control cameras. A fence is a very, very major and important piece of defense in depth. And I fully expect that it will do a lot to help protect the security of our synagogue. So thank you very much for your consideration. Really appreciate all that you do. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Sharon Giordano. Sharon, if you can unmute yourself, I'll start your timer.
I wasn't planning to speak, just to listen.
Thank you. The next speaker is Chaim Schaefer. And I don't see oh, here you go. Mr. Schaefer, you've been allowed to speak. You can go ahead and unmute yourself and I'll start your timer.
Thank you for the opportunity, board. I appreciate it. I likewise, like Sharon, didn't expect to speak. I didn't have any prepared remarks. I am a member of the volunteer synagogue security service that we have to be prepared for any untoward attacks. I hate the idea that we even have to think about it and have to consider it. And I'm saddened by the fact that that's what's happening in the world. But we, as many people before me have said, we want to take preventative measures. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I think Benjamin Franklin said that. Anyway, we appreciate your consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Marjorie Gang.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Marjorie Gang, and I thank you for allowing me to speak on this very important topic. I am a board member, and I am the membership chairperson for Congregation Beth Abraham Jacob. Recently, I've been asked by both current and potential members what safety measures are being taken to keep our congregants safe. One woman told me she's fearful to attend Shabbat services because of the uptick in anti-Semitic crime. She said recent attacks against Jewish people and destruction at synagogues across the country make her feel fearful to be in our building. A different woman said while she may decide to return to services, she's uncomfortable bringing her small children with her for fear of what she calls an incident. She elaborated by saying that you never think it can happen here until it does. We're living in very difficult times, and I strongly believe every possible measure that can be taken to ensure the safety of worshipers at Congregation Beth Abraham Jacob must be taken. This includes allowing an 8-foot fence to be built to potentially prevent an attack. I thank you very much for your consideration on this very important matter.
Thank you. The next speaker is Robert Kovac.
Thank you. Hi, I'm the president and CEO of the Jewish Federation of Northeastern New York, a member of Congregation Beth Abraham Jacob, and a resident of the city of Albany. Just about everyone has already mentioned, the American Jewish world changed on October 27th of 2018 when the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh fell victim to a mass shooting with 11 dead, excuse me, and 6 wounded. It was at that point the deadliest attack on a Jewish community on US soil. Since then, all American Jewish communities have been on alert, and with the recent uptick in anti-Semitism, on high alert. All over the country, synagogues and other Jewish institutions have been working with local law enforcement and national security organizations to institute security protocols as well as facility upgrades. Because of my position, I stay current on events in our Jewish community locally and communities around the world. I've attended national seminars on recommendations for keeping our communities safe, and I've traveled to many other Jewish communities to see firsthand how they have responded. This past weekend, for example, I visited a synagogue in Los Angeles, which had armed guards surrounding the entire perimeter of the building. Safety followed by perceived safety is what is most important to everyone. As a threatened group, the proposed fence we would consider a minor inconvenience for a very significant security upgrade. We also do a lot of work in the interfaith community, and our interfaith friends face similar challenges. And we had a letter from the Roman Catholic Diocese in support of the fence. I assume you have, or I could read it, it's brief. In this time of ongoing threats to many religious institutions, we sadly yet full-throatedly endorse the congregation of Beth Abraham Jacobs' proposal to erect an 8-foot high fence that is a combination of high steel pickets and chain link in certain areas to protect their people and property from increasingly nefarious behavior from those who would seek to do them harm. So I echo my fellow congregants in hoping to receive this variance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kovac. The next speaker on the list is Stu Gang.
Hello, good evening to the board. I assume you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I've been a congregant at Beth Abraham Jacob for 8 years now. I have a law enforcement background, but I'm not speaking as an expert. There are a lot of variables in security matters, but a fence is a rather simple matter. In protecting anyone or anything, the key is to keep the threat as far away as possible. If you succeed at that, you're basically home free. The Secret Service, for instance, has overlapping levels of security for the president, as you would expect. It's not just the agents you see within 3, 4, 5, 6 feet of the president. And they call that strategy or that tactic, they call it the ring of security, that there are, I don't remember whether it was 4 rings or 5 rings extending out from the person they're protecting. Given the size of Beth Abraham's acreage, it's a rather large property. An 8-foot fence is not disproportionate. And in fact, from the renderings I've seen, even enhances the appearance of the building, the grounds, and the synagogue. A 4-foot fence just does not keep out a possible threat, does not keep a possible threat at bay. And as I said, there are a lot of variables and uncertainties in security work, but of this, I am very certain I am not on the fence about that. I thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you, Mr. Gang. The next speaker on the list is Elliot Chester.
Hi there, can you all hear me?
Yes.
All right, thanks. My name's Elliot Chester. My wife Maureen and I are located to Albany and relocated to Albany in January 2019 with no prior connections to the area, so that Maureen could take a job as a nurse at Albany Med. We're members of Congregation Beth Abraham Jacob, and I'm a board member at the Shul. We love living in Albany and are grateful to be here. As others on this call have articulated, the security need for an 8-foot fence is real. Currently, our building is highly exposed to potential threats, and we just don't have very much cover from potential assailants. Preventive measures like the fence both serve as a deterrent to potential attackers and greatly reduce the chance that any such attack would be successful. To echo what Artie said in particular, my wife and I both run the same scenarios in our head while we're in the building, which is, thinking to ourselves, if someone comes up to the windows with violent intentions, what will we do? It's not a pleasant thing to think about. It's quite jarring, particularly during a time when you want to be focused on prayer. But we can't really help but feel that way in the post-Pittsburgh and post-Poway world that we live in. And offense of this nature would let us dwell on that scenario an awful lot less. And I think that the proposed fence meets the security need while also being visually appealing. Our goal is not to close ourselves off from the surrounding community, but to allow us to safely continue in our mission of serving the broader Albany community. And I think the fence would help us in that mission. And for that reason, I hope that the board will grant this variance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chester. The next speaker on the list does not appear to be present in the participant list, but I'll call your name in case you are available under a different name. The name I have is Herman Ungerman. And if you are on a different name, if you can raise your hand and I can try to unmute you. Does not appear that Herman Ungerman is on the attendees list, and that would be the final person I have on the list to speak for this evening.
Thank you, Louise. Are there any members of the public who are attending this meeting tonight who did not sign up in advance to speak that would like to get your opportunity to provide 3 minutes of testimony to the board? And if so, please raise your hand and Luis will call upon you.
The first individual I think I saw was Aaron Hall.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Erin Hall. I have lived in Albany for almost 14 years. I came here to take a job in the capital region. I have 3 children. My youngest is 6, my oldest is 16. He's a student at Albany High. My youngest, the greater part of, I would say that her first 5.5 years of life and nearly all her waking hours, she was at the Albany JCC. I'll get to some more of that in just a moment. I've loved living in Albany. It's a beautiful community, as a Jewish community, as just a city overall. Me and my family are so happy, and we've thrived all these years. We look forward to thriving even more years as we all progress in life. You know, I think I grew up with a lot of naivete. And in recent years, it's been shaken. I think a bit of naivete that, you know, right just prevails and the bad guys can't do any harm, and I should hold my head high. And that there's a lot in that. But the reality is that my children and I have experienced anti-Semitic slurs shouted out of cars, coins thrown at us amidst those slurs. My little one, who I mentioned, was at the JCC for daycare for most of her early, first 5.5 years of life. She was there, and I received the phone calls for the bomb threats each time. And while they were proven to be empty threats, it was nonetheless terrifying, and there was nothing I could do to prevent anything if they had been real. So I just like to just for folks to consider, and this is also an opportunity. This congregation has done so much to do what they can do on their end, and to do what we can do with our resources. And I think this is a great opportunity for the zoning board to team with the congregation and set an atmosphere, not just for Jewish congregations, but for all kinds of communities in Albany, to have these symbiotic relationships that work towards keeping our community safe and thriving. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. I did see a chat there that we may have skipped Jack Rosenblum. He was the first speaker on the list, and I apologize if I did overlook you, but feel free to go ahead and provide your testimony at this time. Mr. Rosenblum, whenever you're ready, you can unmute yourself and provide a testimony. Mr. Rosenblum, whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I guess I was supposed to be first, but now I'm last, but still not forgotten. Thank you very much, Luis. I have been a member of Congregation Beth Abe for many years. I raised my family in Albany, and while my children were growing up and attending synagogue, I never had any concerns or fears of anti-Semitism in Albany. And as many have told you before me, no longer is this the case. I've been watching acts of violence in communities similar to ours. Synagogues have been vandalized, people have been attacked, and the greatest danger is from lone wolves. These people, you can't predict where they're coming from or when they'll come. And currently, when I and my children and grandchildren attend services, we're greeted by our armed guard, and we've done everything we can except keep the perpetrators away from the building. And I believe by installing this 8-foot fence, we'll be able to know who's approaching, and the people and the security we'll be able to first interview them to see whether they have good intentions, or maybe there's somebody we don't want to allow into the premises. We want to prevent a dangerous condition from becoming a dangerous event. And we don't want to find ourselves regretting that we didn't act proactively. If we wait until we're attacked to take action, it's too late. On Monday, Governor Andrew Cuomo ordered the state police to step up protection of Jewish sites across the state following this surge of anti-Semitic attacks. I think that speaks volumes. I'm asking you as a board that's responsible for protecting the welfare, safety, and security of the citizens of this community to assist us in granting us the ability to protect ourselves that will be provided by approving this variance. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenblum. The next speaker would be Audrey Hoffman. Whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Audrey Hoffman came up on the screen. My name is Herman Ungerman. I'm a lifelong member of the synagogue. I'm a kid. I'm 90 years old. And I'm very happy to have the mentality and the physical ability to speak with you guys. I'm born here. I'll more than likely die here. The synagogue for the past 60 years has been an extreme important element in my life. I lived through the anti-Semitism of the Second World War, which started in 1939. It's stronger in our area today than it was then. You're all aware of the Holocaust. You're all aware of the pogroms that took place. My parents came over to this country right after the First World War. And I've been privileged to live in the greatest country of the world. Raised my family. I prayed and I lived my life as I chose. I have absolutely no regrets. I look at this safety issue as not an aesthetic view, but the preventive, and so that people can practice and can live in comfort, or as quietly as they can. It's not to keep us in, it's to keep us out. And that's the reason for this fence. I want to thank you for the opportunity. I want to express my gratitude for all of those who have spoken. And I hope I can express my gratitude to you for a right decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman. That would conclude the individuals who would like to speak during the testimony period in the panelists or attendees list. I don't see anyone else's hand up.
Thank you, Luis. In that case, Mr. Hirschberg, Rabbi Feldman, we generally offer the applicant the ability to take a brief rebuttal if there are any statements in opposition to the project. We have offered also the ability to rebut to people who only got positive statements, such as this evening. So if you'd like to add anything else in the next few minutes, we are more than welcome to listen. And we may indeed ask some further questions of you, Mr. Hirschberg, and of you, Rabbi.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I just have a couple of comments. I want to categorize what we were asked to provide. Number one, we were asked to provide instances of other congregations or facilities that have the need for fences of this type or height, primarily in New York State, and we will tend to get those so we can put those on record. Another was the rationale for why not 6 or 7 or 8 feet. We're going to discuss that internally, and I think what I heard from the representative from the Albany Police Department, they have an opinion upon that, and hopefully they will give that in their formal comments to the board. And if in fact I missed anything else that we still have to provide for you, if you want to tell me now, we'll try to make it up, try to make it to you.
I did have one additional question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Martin, go ahead.
Going back to the legal requirement for the board to minimize the variance, I'm curious, and certainly you can go back to speak to the applicant when you're preparing more material for us to review before we consider action. I'm curious if there's been the consideration of any plantings that would provide both a security benefit from shielding the fence, but also a deterrent. So such as thorn bushes or things like that, which would be on either side of the fence that would prevent somebody from even, or deter them from coming close to the fence or coming over it for fear that they may get tangled in them. And that might provide the same security benefit of a fence that's 8 feet when in fact the variance may be a request for a 7 or 6 foot fence. So I'm curious if that's been considered and if that's been eliminated as a consideration.
We had considered a hedge in conjunction with the fence. Many of the fence projects in the past, as this board has considered, required planting material in conjunction with fence variances, even on where there were side streets where a lot had 2 frontages. You granted a few variances, like not a significant amount, but a few variances like that. It was always required hedging with the fence to reduce the visual impact of it. We did
Right, my question is more related to features of plantings like thorn bushes and things that would discourage people from even getting close to the fence, in addition to deciding whether to climb it and take their chances getting stuck on those things. So
okay,
we'll
provide information on it, and again, I'm not so sure how effective it would be, but we could certainly do that.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate it.
Yes, and Mr. Hirschberg, this is Richard. I guess one last thing, which I was fortunately reminded by counsel that I had asked you, was to, if you are aware of any best practices for religious institutions that are facing similar security concerns, if there is some form of best practices for building either single or multiple layers of deterrence or anything like that. If you can find that and provide it to the board, that would be very helpful. Let me observe, I'll be asking the APD also for something similar, and we'll probably also get in touch with the state police, and we may also ask the Corporation Counsel to talk to the FBI for us on this issue, because I think, as many people said tonight, this is an issue that is getting worse over the past several years, not getting better. And so the board should collect as much information and evidence as it can of things that are being done and are being suggested. So if you don't mind looking into that, Mr. Hirschberg, as I said, I'll look also separately so that we'll have a more robust record for the point where the board makes a decision on this case.
Yeah, I can look for best practices that they have been installed other places, but I'd have to get permission to publish them, because quite often a whole bunch of security plans are kept private for the reason that it gives opportunity to circumvent your safety needs. But I can see when I got any document that the author would be willing to share with me that I could provide.
Yes, and thank you. And please don't divulge any confidential or other sensitive security issues. We can get something of a more generalized nature from the Albany Police Department and other law enforcement entities. So if there's something that architects and engineers follow in this circumstance, that would be helpful to the board, but don't divulge any measures that have been taken by any religious institutions in Albany or in the capital region.
Thank you, we won't.
In that case, the board will not be making a decision on this case tonight. As I had stated earlier, we thank the applicants and everyone who has come to speak tonight. We appreciate the strong level of concern that you have for this issue, and the board will think about this issue. We will discuss it at our next workshop, which will be the second Wednesday of June. And please feel free to supplement the record between now and then. And again, thank you for everyone who came out tonight to present to us on this issue.
Thank you.
Okay, the Next case on the agenda is 40 South Manning. And let's see. The representatives here would be, and the applicants, Brett and Alicia Sears. Are you, there they are. Okay, let me just pull up the PowerPoint. Brett and Alicia, are you prepared to proceed with your case?
Yes, we are. Thanks, Luis. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. We are. So we are Brett and Alicia Sears. We are the owners of 40 South Manning Boulevard. We are proposing a variance for installation of 58 linear feet of 6 foot 100% opaque fencing in a front yard area. And you can see the area variance is front yard. And there were two variances, 6 foot height and solid fencing. And so we've sort of melded those together. This is our primary residence. It's a 60 by 140 foot corner lot in the city of Albany. We have our single family home on that lot. We bought the property in June of 2011. We proposed a fence to be erected on the property to enclose our rear yard. This will replace a wrought iron fence that was in place when the property was purchased by us. As I said, the variance in question is for the fencing that fronts Myrtle Avenue, approximately 48 linear feet of fencing that will be placed 12 feet away from the grass line on Myrtle Avenue, and then an additional 10 feet that will return the fence adjacent to the driveway on our property, return it to the house, the plane of the house. And the current code allows for a maximum height of 4 feet with no more than 60% opacity. And we're looking for 6 feet, 100% opaque. The main reason for seeking this variance is for privacy for myself and my wife, Alicia, and our 3 beautiful children. Next, please. And so we've learned quite a bit over the past few weeks, and we appreciate the help from Luis and from the board. And we're sure you understand that there are alleged practical difficulties of properties located on corner lots in the city of Albany. That corner properties fronting streets have in effect no rear yard. Owners of these lots are afforded a lesser degree of privacy than lots situated between corner lots. And I didn't make this up. This came from the BZA decision dated September 16th, 1994. And I'll talk about that decision in a few minutes, please. Next, please. We do believe that our property is a unique corner lot. Myrtle Avenue in this area is a dead-end road, and it serves only as an easement for driveway access for 40 and 44 South Manning, which is our house and our neighbor's house, and for 2 houses behind us, 951 and 952 Myrtle Avenue. It is not a vehicular thoroughfare, so there's no line of sight issues created by the installation of a solid fence. As we said, it's a dead end. There is a pathway for pedestrian and bicycle traffic. It is a major pedestrian and bicycle thoroughfare between Buckingham Lake and the Pine Hills neighborhood. And we all know the beautiful Upper Madison area that we all love to walk to. And so quite a few people walk by our house. And so we believe that that makes our corner property unique in that we see an increased amount of pedestrian and bicycle traffic when compared to other lots in the city with dead ends in the neighborhood. So it reduces our personal property. Personal privacy. Thanks, sweetie. Next, please. And just a visual of the wrought iron fence on the left that was there, enclosing our property. And on the right, you can see that the pink area is really the area in question there. And that's the only area in question on this. The other part of the fence is not in question. And to the north of us, there's already an existing fence from my neighbor. Next, please. And you can get a better sense of how far it is away from the road here. It's 12 feet off of the road line there. And we're essentially replacing that wrought iron fence. The picture on the right shows the pedestrian walkthrough. You'll see my neighbor's car parked just to the left of that pathway there. And so People essentially cut through the walk-through, walk in the street to access the Pine Hills neighborhood there. Next one, please, Luis. Thank you. If you were to walk through the Myrtle Avenue cut through, you can see we've removed the wrought iron fence. And this picture was taken, you can see directly into our rear yard, into our patio space, there's really very little privacy. I also included a picture of the front of the house. From Google Maps, my wife painted the porch last summer, so it looks much better. But note that the fence would be unseen from South Manning Boulevard. Next, please. There were comments that were made at the workshop, and we really appreciate those comments from the board. The one comment was the property is not unique because every single house in the city on a corner lot has pedestrian activity on both sides. That's the norm for any corner lot, but we believe ours is unique. The cost of the fence needed to be more detailed, and we'll do that. It seemed like our argument was all or nothing with no negotiating or a different fence or materials, and we'll speak to that as well. And then we wanted to show fences that show the character of the neighborhood and really come to the answer, is this variance substantial? Next, please. And so we believe our property is subjected to increased pedestrian traffic. And so we had some fun with this over the past few weeks since the meeting on the 12th of May. And we did essentially a stakeout. And so on May 15th at 10:30 a.m., my wife and son spent about an hour on South Main in Amherst, which is a corner property, dead end. There is no pedestrian walkway. On South Manning and Myrtle, my son stayed in the backyard for that hour, and we just counted pedestrians and bicycles. And during that hour, we saw 22 total pedestrians and bikes, while South Main and Amherst saw 2. Those 2 pedestrians were residents there. And the 16 pedestrians, 2 of them were residents of a property on our dead end. So it represents a 1,000% increase in pedestrian and bike traffic on our corner lot and Myrtle Avenue as compared to this other dead end, no pedestrian walkway. Next one, please. Later on that same day, we spent time in our backyard, and then between 1 and 2 p.m., we were 1 block south of us, and that's at South Manning and Mercer Avenue. So it does connect Buckingham and the Pine Hills, but it is a vehicle thoroughfare. It's a road. It's not a dead end on Mercer Avenue. During that hour-long period, we saw 8 total pedestrians and bikers on Myrtle Avenue and 3 total on Mercer Avenue. So we had a 166% increase in pedestrian and bike traffic there. Next, please. And so we repeated this this past weekend. It's great. We have 3 kids. They're super smart. And so they participated. And on May 22nd, from 10:33 to 11:35 a.m., we were on South Manning, and then South Manning and Freeman. That's a few blocks south of us. And what's significant about that is it's a dead end road, and there is a pedestrian walkway with a sidewalk through that area. And then we were 2 blocks south also on South Manning and Cortland, which is not a pedestrian walkway, although you could walk on there, but it is it's a road. And so we saw a 550% increase in pedestrian bike traffic on Myrtle and South Manning as compared to South Manning and Freeman, which is a dead end with a pedestrian walkway, and a 200% increase in pedestrian and bike traffic on Myrtle Avenue when compared to Cortland. Next, please. We're almost done with this. And then finally on May 23rd, from 9 to 10:30 a.m., we just repeated it just to get different numbers at different times. And you'll see a 300% increase on Myrtle Avenue and South Manning as compared to South Manning and Freeman, dead end with a pedestrian walkway, and South Main and Amherst, dead end, not a pedestrian walkway. And the 2 pedestrians on South Main and Amherst were seen entering a property on that dead end. So they were residents. So we believe that these numbers, although we are not civil engineers, proves that our property is a unique corner property, and we do see an increased pedestrian and bicycle traffic load when we are compared to other corner properties in our beautiful city. And it's really due to the dead end on Myrtle Avenue that contains this pedestrian walkway that connects our two neighborhoods to the Upper Madison Commercial Center. Therefore, we believe our family is subjected to a decreased level of personal privacy while using our yard. Next, please, Louise. We were asked to look at the cost of the fence compared to other materials. And so we fleshed that out a little bit for the board, and we think that's important. The fence panels are 6 feet tall, 8 feet wide. It's beautiful pressure treated wood with 4-inch dog-eared pickets. To create this fence, it would be 48 feet frontage on Myrtle Avenue, and then return to the house. It would be 8 panels. At Lowe's, they're $59.98 per panel. I included a link for that if you'd like to see. And then, of course, we need posts as well. They require about 9 posts at about $21, $22 per. So total materials would be about $677. Labor, the cost of the job, total job, $3,000 divided by all the panels that are installed, comes to about $93 per panel installed. So total with materials and installation is about $1,427.66. And next one, please. One alternative we considered instead of fencing was arborvitaes. And so we would choose 6 foot tall mature bushes. And those at Fadigan's Nursery, they're beautiful, and they're $129.99 a piece. Of course, we would need topsoil to help plant those, and that's $8.99 per bag. We would need approximately 15 arborvitaes, which would be a cost of just under $2,000 to us, and the soil bags. And Fadigan's Nursery will quote an install price, and their install price is 75% of the total cost of materials. So that would be $2,084 for materials and another $1,500 for install, giving our total purchase of the arborvitae and installation is $3,648.23. So it would cost us an additional $2,200 in materials and labor just to enjoy the same privacy that other non-corner lot citizens in our beautiful city enjoy. And next, please. We were told during the workshop it's a zero-sum game for us, like it was all or nothing, and that's not true at all. In our original application to the BZA, we offered concessions. It was wisely pointed out by a board member. We certainly would entertain installing a 6 foot solid fence with maybe smaller, less expensive, and less mature trees along the perimeter. These would grow into full-size bushes in about 3 to 5 years, which would provide an enhanced greenscape for pedestrians and cyclists to enjoy when passing by. And I think in the previous presentation, Mr. Hirschberg was mentioning something about that. This greenscape along a fence was really the crux of the granting of a variance at 115 South Manning Boulevard, which is 0.2 miles away from us. And that was granted, and I'll speak to that in a moment. Next. And so we do need to speak to the character of the neighborhood. And really, in speaking to our attorney and other friends and neighbors, what does the neighborhood look like and feel like as one travels through it? And I think we're all familiar with the 14th Ward and 10th Ward and 13th Ward. And so on the left is 115 South Manning Boulevard. This has a 6 foot fence. It's fully solid fence. It was installed with a variance, I believe, in 1994. The variance required that the fence be installed inside existing greenery. So this greenscape is provided there. And that's 2/10 of a mile away from our home. We can practically see it from our porch. On the right is 22 Marion Avenue. It's a 6 foot opaque fence. It was installed without a variance, but certainly it gives a character of the neighborhood. That fence appears to be much closer to Plymouth Street there. Certainly I run by that every day when I'm running through the 14th Ward. Next slide, please. There is on the left here is 44 South Pine Street on the corner of South Pine and Myrtle Avenue. This is 500 feet away from our property. It is a semi-opaque fence, 6 feet tall. It was installed with a variance. It should be noted that this fence is much closer to the road. It is also installed on an area where there is a curb, which elevates it off the road, probably 4 or 5 inches, giving them an advantage of more privacy. And I believe that variance was granted for the issue of privacy and safety for residents playing in that yard. And we'll see on the right this monstrosity of a fence at 137 Lenox Avenue. It's a 6-foot fence, fully opaque. It was installed without a variance, but it does give us a good idea of the character of the neighborhood that we're dealing with. And I certainly do doubt that the city of Albany and the codes department will go around and order the many of these hundreds of fences that do make up the character of this neighborhood, order them to be brought to code. It certainly could happen. I doubt that would happen anytime soon. Next slide, please. And then this beautiful fence is on 11 Summit Avenue. My friend lives here. It's a 6-foot opaque fence. It was installed with a variance in 2012. The existing fence was not providing adequate privacy, safety, and security for the lot, particularly for the applicant's 3 children. We also, my wife and I also have 3 beautiful children too. And we deserve the same privacy, safety, and security for our lot as well. Next slide, please. So we do have to consider alternatives, and we're happy to. One alternative is no fence, of course, but that fails to address our privacy issues. Another one would be a code compliant 4-foot fence, not more than 60% opaque, which would also fail to address our privacy issues. Keep in mind, we see increased pedestrian traffic of 166% to 1000% when compared to other corner lots in the city of Albany. We could, instead of using a fence, install other things like bushes or arborvitaes. That, as I have shown, creates a significant financial burden for my wife and I. They do fail to offer full privacy. And I think it was mentioned by Fadigans, and also mentioned in the workshop, that those would take 3 to 5 years to fully bloom. I hope many of the people on the board have children, because my wife and I have 3 beautiful children. They grow up quick, and in 3 to 5 years, 2/3 of my children will have moved out of the house and on to college. And so time is not really something that we have much of to really enjoy the space that we have purchased in our yard with the amount of privacy that we want. Next, please. We talked about installation of a 4-foot solid fence, 2 feet of lattice on top, much like the fence at 44 South Pine that I showed you earlier. Our family, we are a tall people. We are all over 5 feet, even the 10-year-old. So folks can see in and see what we're doing. The average height of an American male is 5'9", and the average height of American female is 5'4". So people walking by could certainly peek in on us. We also thought about installation of maybe a 5-foot fence, so not quite a 6-foot solid fence. But again, we are tall people. And when we examined that, neither Lowe's nor the Home Depot currently sells 5-foot fence panels. So it would be hard to do. Next, please. Another alternative is it would be within code to erect 6-foot fencing along the plane of our house extending westward. That would considerably reduce our usable fence yard space by more than 480 square feet. It would also put useless space outside of our fence that we would still be required to maintain. We purchased the home with the expectation of having a large private rear yard for our children to play. 2 of our children play with the Albany Soccer Club travel team. It's great to have space for them to run, kick a ball, and play around. And by taking almost 500 square feet of that space away, would just be unthinkable for my wife and I. And the variance for the 115 South Manning has set the precedent that a 6-foot high, fully opaque fence is allowable away from the plane of the house. And so that's one alternative that we've considered and perhaps won't work for us. Next, please. Substantiality. We think this variance is not substantial, and that's our answer to that. A 6-foot high fence is a 50% departure from the current code of 4 feet. A fully opaque fence, 66% departure. Keep in mind that we have a 166 to 1,000% increase in pedestrian and bike traffic when compared to other nearby corner lots in our city. So that's a substantial variance of our privacy when compared to other corner lots in the city. Next, please. Impact on the environment. We don't believe there will be any impact on the local environment by the installation of this fence. Next, please. And we understand that this hardship has been self-created, but it does not preclude us from granting the area variance in this circumstance. Next, please. During the workshop, also it was brought up that perhaps these previous variances were granted under previous codes. We know the new code was in place since June 1st, 2017. And looking at the previous code, really it says in residential zoning districts, fences shouldn't be 4 feet high and no more than 60% solid in a front yard. And the current code really says about the exact same thing, that front yardage or frontage should have no more than 4 foot high, 60% opaque. So the codes really aren't that much difference. Next, please. In searching for things in the Albany Times Union, our local newspaper, and I think even Mr. Hirschberg mentioned things like this, like a community that feels safe and interesting requires forethought and planning. So we want to feel safe. We want to have our privacy. Richard Berkeley, chairman of the BZA, really said our old zoning code was all about telling you what you cannot build. So our new zoning code should tell us what we can build. And we do believe that we have presented the evidence that we can build a 6 foot high, a fully opaque fence on our property. Next, please. And so in conclusion, we have a very unique property. We see an incredible amount of pedestrian and bicycle traffic. We love biking in the city. We love walking in the city. We don't love everyone that walks by our house. It has the pedestrian walkway through a dead-end road that's adjacent to our property, and it reduces our personal privacy when we're enjoying our rear yard. We've explored alternatives to meet these needs, and they have been exhausted. We believe we have met the threshold to be granted an area variance to install a 6 foot solid fence to enclose our rear yard. It's consistent with other fences in the 14th Ward, 10th Ward, 13th Ward, and it will not change the unique character of our beautiful neighborhood. And we thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you today. I really appreciate it. And I think that's it, Luis.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So for, if the board would like to provide their questions, we can do that, or we can move on to speakers to provide testimony. I believe we have one person who signed up to speak on this case.
Thanks, Luis. Are there any questions from the board?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. In your plot plan, you had identified the distance of the fence to the edge of the grass, but there was no description of the lot and the distance from the fence to the city right-of-way, which I suspect, given the construction of sidewalk on either end of the side street, may be somewhere in that vein. Is it possible to provide a map that accurately describes or illustrates the location of the fence in relationship to the city right-of-way where a sidewalk could be located?
Yes, and I believe that that's a good question. I believe that comes just a few feet in further the city right away. And if you look at that picture back on that slide, you do see a sidewalk in our. Yep, there it is. To just past the there's the woman on it there. That is not. I do not believe that is a city-built sidewalk. That sidewalk is not to code. That was placed by the residents of 951 Myrtle Avenue, and that is not placed by the city of Albany. And so it's an 8 foot, it comes, the city right away is about 6 feet further to the north of that orange line. So it would be to the right of that picture. So there's the next, it's about 18 feet from the grass line there, Mr.
That's one thing we'll need to confirm.
Yeah, we can do that easily enough. Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other? Oh, go ahead, Mark.
When I came to alternatives considered, one of the slides you presented that I believe you mentioned it received a variance was a 4 foot fence with that was opaque with a 2-foot semi-opaque top, which in essence minimized the variance that the board would have granted. Is that something that you've considered in this case as a viable alternative to minimize the variance?
Yes, we have considered that. Like I said, people that are walking by, most people are taller than 4 feet and certainly can see through that lattice top. Our children are taller than 4 or 5 feet. And also in that variance that was granted at 44 South Pine, that property sits up on a curb, which adds, and there is no sidewalk there as well, which adds about, thank you, Luis, about 5 inches to that height. And you'll see that on the left picture there. Thank you. So there is no sidewalk. People are walking in the street when they're walking on the north side of Myrtle at the corner of South Pine there. And so that fence is approximately 5 feet high, or 5 inches, I'm sorry, higher than ours would be. And actually, it's much closer to the road as well. And so we don't believe that would give us adequate privacy, considering the number of people and cyclists that go by our house on a daily basis.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the questions.
Are there any further questions from the board?
I may have one more, but go ahead, Chairman.
Richard, I have a question as well.
Oh, go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you. To follow up on the privacy concerns, specifically with the 4-foot fence with some of the lattice work, in your presentation, you'd mentioned the average height of an adult male is 5 feet 9 inches, which is just 3 inches difference from the 6-foot fence. So is there any concern that, the 6-foot fence might not give enough privacy, considering there's just a few inches difference?
That's a great question. And certainly somebody that's 5'9", their eyes would fall probably at 5'6" or 5'5". And also when they're walking in the street 12 feet away from the house, their line of sight may be altered a little bit, so they may not be able to see over the 6-foot fence, but certainly see through something that's 4 foot with lattice on top.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the question.
Thank you. Are there any further questions from the board?
I recall in one of the slides of the presentation, you had mentioned the efforts to minimize the variance and consideration, that there were some changes made to the application, but it still mentioned a 6-foot fully opaque fence. So maybe I missed something there in the efforts to minimize the variance. Could you recap what those efforts were that considered minimizing the variance?
Just to be clear, are we talking about the alternatives there?
No, you had, in a previous slide, you had talked about efforts to minimize the variance and said that you had modified or there were changes between submitting the application to the board and your comments tonight.
No, I think that there were just a better description on the alternatives considered and why they wouldn't work for us.
Okay.
And when our first application to the board was one application that was 6 foot and fully opaque. With Luis's guidance, we made these 2 applications. In our original application too, we were talking about things like safety and other things, which all sort of fall under our privacy.
So the variance is still the same. It's still a 6-foot fully opaque fence, correct? There's
100%. That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Martin, were you talking about the fact that they mentioned that they would, I guess it's a little confusing, but it sounds like there is a consideration for another option that would be accepted.
Yeah, I'm still trying to feel my way through that.
Okay.
If the 6-foot fully opaque fence is the request, then that's the request. I'm not certain.
I understand what you mean. I believe when we looked at 115 South Manning Boulevard, they were granted a variance for a 6-foot fully opaque fence as long as it was placed with inside greenery. So there were greenery on the outside of that fence. And so one concession that we would entertain with the board is granting the variance of a 6-foot fence that is solid with the concession that we would install a smaller arborvitae that will then grow and create a natural green space, much like the property at 115 South Manning Boulevard.
So a conditional approval, not an approval of a minimization. So I think that's what we're.
That's right. Yes, sir.
Okay. Thanks.
Yes, thank you.
Are there any further questions from the board? Let me observe then before we move on to public comment that while we appreciate your parsing of the then current 1993 zoning code and the 2017 code in existence, and while we appreciate the work that you put in there, we obviously are the interpreters of the code and would discuss those differences with council as we get to the next steps in this process. So at this point, Luis, you said we had one person signed up from the public to speak for or against the project?
Yes, I have Edith Leet. Edith, if you're still on the list, let me just pull up the participant. If you are, I think there's 2 individuals. I'm not sure if one of them is a device for speaking into, but if Edith, if you're wanting to provide testimony, you can go ahead and do that, and I can set the timer whenever you're ready.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, thank you. I am Edith Leet. I live, I'm the next door neighbor to the Sears family. Their backyard is on our side yard. We, my husband and I and our family have lived at this address. It will be 50 years in July. We are concerned about this, this fence. They have extended the fence almost 8 feet beyond the property line. And that it's very close to our driveway. That makes it difficult for us to get in and out of our cars. That's not property that they own. I got an email from the our Department of Planning Development, is that it? Who said that it looked like they were asking for a fence that was on their property line, and sent me a map of that. But this looks like they are looking to have the fence 8 feet beyond their property line. And I would oppose that. I also think it will change the character of the neighborhood, because right now, and for the last 50 years, it has been very open, very green, and so forth. And I think a stockade fence or high fence of any kind will make the neighborhood less inviting. It may be that there are a lot of pedestrians and bikes that go back and forth, but I really don't see, and I see them coming by all the time. I don't see them trying to look into yards. They come by and they walk where they're going, and they go about their business. So I think it's to have that high fence to prevent people from looking in is really not necessary. I think most people are not going to stand at the fence and peer in at them. I guess I submitted pictures. I did not do a PowerPoint. For some reason, there was a glitch. Okay, for some reason, there was a glitch, and we did not receive the notice of this meeting until we went to the office on Tuesday and found out about it. So if I'd had more time, I could have maybe done a better presentation, but I did submit pictures, and perhaps one of the board members has those and could show them to you.
Thank you. Chairperson, I have also one additional person that did sign up for commentary. I didn't see them until just now. Have Chris Harrington. Did you want to allow the individual to provide a testimony?
Yes, please, Luis.
Chris Harrington, you can go ahead.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right, excellent. We're at 16 South Manning. We walk by very often. I believe the Sears deserve their privacy. It is heavily traveled. My wife is an Albany police sergeant. I am a 20-year veteran of the Albany Fire Department. I believe today, especially, there is a need for privacy and families to have time on their own. And there is no through traffic with vehicles, as the Sears family had said. Every time you walk by, you can see everything they're doing. Born and raised in the city of Albany, and there are fences of this situation all over the city. And I think they're not asking for something unreasonable. I think it would beautify the neighborhood. We have a fantastic group of people around here, and they all understand what the Sears are looking for. And we do not have a problem with this whatsoever.
Thank you. And that would conclude the list of speakers. I don't see anyone else in the panelist list or participant list looking to provide comment.
Thank you, Luis. And Mr. and Mrs. Sears, would you like to take a brief, less than 3-minute rebuttal of the public comment?
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'll speak to Mrs. Leet and her comment first. The fence that we are installing goes out exactly to the same distance from Myrtle Avenue as the wrought iron fence that was there previously. I believe Mr. Daly asked for more specific property line details with that, and we will provide that to him. Just to let you in on the big secret, Mrs. Lee thinks that there's a property line dispute. It's been surveyed twice, and there is no property line dispute. Interestingly, she's concerned about us using city property. She's currently gardening on city property at the dead end. We know that per code, people are not allowed to dig and just choose to dig up city property in the city of Albany, but she is doing that. It's really just, it's angry neighbor really. And by walking through the 14th Ward, the 13th Ward, and the 10th Ward, those fences on quarter properties exist. They are there. It will not change the character of this neighborhood one bit. And I must also thank my beautiful neighbors, Chris and Nora Harrington. They're great people, and both have been in service to the city of Albany for well over 20 years.
And it should also be noted that when we moved in, we knew the Pascansers who lived here first told us we had property outside of the current fence in the back part, which abuts her driveway, the Leets driveway. And we took that back about 6 years ago, and they've been a little bitter about that since. So that's also where she's coming into. She has, it's difficult for her, it may be more difficult for her to get out of her driveway because she has bushes growing 3 feet into her driveway from her house. And if she would curb that and trim that rather than push out everywhere, she'd have plenty of room.
Anyway, just angry neighbor. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions from the board or the applicants?
If we could go back to the photo of the street, I know that in Street View, I just want to see the street again to be able to understand the current property lines. Okay. All right. Thanks. Yeah. So what would really help clarify is the distance of the fence to the city right of way. One of the reasons why the board has these restrictions on fence heights and locations is to preserve sight lines for vehicle egress and outgress. People pulling in and out of driveways. One thing that certainly as a parent concerns me is kids running out of driveway or running on a sidewalk and somebody pulling out of a driveway and not seeing them. So I certainly want to be able to not set a situation where a fence can block somebody's point of view when they're exiting a driveway. So if we could provide that to supplement the record, I would appreciate it. And my last question is, are there any physical features of the property which make putting the fence closer to the house or in any different configuration? Are there any physical conditions on the property? It doesn't look like any trees, but which make placing the fence difficult for moving it further in with the plane of the house?
No.
That's a good question. There's no physical difficulties other than our desire to utilize the maximum amount of space for our property. That was there, as you can see by the wrought iron fence on the left. That was there when we purchased the property.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. In that case, the board will not be taking any action on this case tonight. We will hold it over, discuss it at our workshop coming up on the second Wednesday of June, and we'll announce a decision on it at a future point in time. If you wish to continue to supplement the record, both for the applicants and for Ms. Leet, please do so. Make sure that you get it in any supplementation at least 48 hours before the workshop so that we can consider it and everybody else has an opportunity to look at it.
Yeah, I do think, and if there's a dispute about the property line, one thing that would supplement the record is the results of the property survey that may help provide the board with an accurate picture of whether there is a dispute about the property line. We certainly can't approve a variance for construction of something on somebody else's property, but that would help clarify that.
Yeah, New York State licensed surveyor has surveyed it and placed pins. They're visible. There is no dispute. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I had a quick question because I know in these types of cases, we often hear about pets. And I noticed that was not said in your presentation. So I was just wondering, do you have any pets?
We have a beautiful parakeet.
So no dog issue, okay.
So I'm assuming that the fence is irrelevant to the parakeet.
Right, we're gonna need a dome over the fence. That's coming next. No, I'm joking. We do have a beautiful 10-year-old daughter who begs daily for a dog, but we're holding out for that. At least until we're certain we have the fence that we need to keep that dog in. But it would be lovely to have a dog running around the yard as well. But that's a great question. Thank you.
In that case, Luis, we do not have any further business on the pending agenda, do we?
Correct. We had 255 Clinton Avenue on the agenda. However, it looks like that may probably be pushed back for June for a planning board secret determination. So there's no actionable motion to take on that.
Great. In that case, I'd like to bring this meeting and public hearing for May 26th of 2021 to a close. I wish to thank all the members of the board, as always, for your service, and all of those folks who listened in and spoke tonight. Thank you for your contribution. Have a good evening, all.
Good. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Luis.
Night.
Good night, everyone. Good night. Oh.
I was a kid.